In the past year, we have really been starting to dive into the concept of ACEs, or Adverse Childhood Experiences. We all know what ACEs are and how they affect our students. But, like many of you, I was left with wanting to know more and to be able to have more application for the students I serve who all have high ACE scores. I was fortunate enough to recently attend the Minnesota School Mental Health Conference, and it was amazing. The major focus of the conference was on trauma. It's easy to think of trauma as that sudden and unexpected event that overwhelms one's capacity to cope. This is only one type of trauma, known as single-event trauma. The severe, multiple traumatic events that occur with the caregiver, often at the beginning of young and vulnerable development stages, is known as complex trauma. Why is trauma important? Because 1 out of 4 children attending school have been exposed to trauma, single or complex, which affects learning and/or behavior. So in your class of 25 students, at least 6 of them are affected neurologically by trauma. Can you guess who they are? Trauma consists of, but not limited to, neglect, death, natural disasters, life-threatening illness or injury, severe accident, abuse, witnessing or being a victim of domestic violence, community violence, or school violence, or unexpected events. So, depending on your prior experience with clowns, you may have just been slightly traumatized. Your brainstem received the visual, which then sent out the trauma alarm. The amygdala fired with adrenaline and responded with either fight, flight, or freeze. Once the amygdala realized there was no true immediate threat, your body released hormone chemicals to rein in the stress response. This event was stored in your hippocampus, and whether or not you remember anything else from this, you will remember the scary clown. So you may have been slightly traumatized from that event, but most of you were able to self-regulate and return to your original regulation baseline. For our trauma kids, their amygdalas are constantly firing because their brains have been physically changed by traumatic experiences. With incorrect wiring and poor connections across the brain, the hippocampus has been damaged and they can't determine the difference between past and current experiences. Even though the clown event was small, think of the kids that experience this slight trauma on a regular basis. Even if their self-regulation is fully functioning, they still struggle to consistently get back to that baseline. Now think of the generational trauma kids. That's the continued trauma cycle from caregiver to caregiver. These kids have spent their entire lives with a higher baseline and their self-regulation is damaged. These kids can't stop and think because they are just trying to survive. So what does this look like in our school? Defiance, avoidance, shut down, outbursts, running away. For traumatized children, the rules of life are broken. Trauma breaks the rules because they have learned the rules don't keep them safe. Life then all becomes about safety. At the high school, we have a rule about keeping sweatshirt hoods down. Yet almost every passing time there are 2 to 3 kids with their hoods up. Why? Because they're trying to self-regulate with what they deem as safe. They don't care about the rules, they are trying to survive in that moment in time. To us it may come across as defiant, and we end up frustrated with the behaviors. So then what? We have to apply the trauma lens and shift our focus from what is wrong with you to what has happened to you. By shifting our focus, we can start to understand why students do what they do, especially when we want them to be learning. One of the things we can do right now is teach them how to regulate before building the relationship. If we just try to develop relationships, we are often missing the first step of regulation. Once they are able to regulate, they can rely on the relationship you have built with them, and then they will be able to reason. Second thing we can do right now is to provide consistency and stability. Structure is healing because trauma is chaos. By providing consistency, we build trust. Lastly, be concrete in offering suggestions for managing emotions. We are asking them to do skills they don't know how to do, so co-regulate with them. They need an adult to help them regulate. Our typical response is, calm down. Well, they don't know how to calm down. In being concrete, you are giving them basic tools like breathing to help regulate. In our society today, trauma is more and more prevalent. We need to learn to dance through the fire. It might be ugly at first, but as with any dance, planning and practice is vital.
created using Powtoon.